Hey everybody, how are you? This is Chapo Dong coming at you again with a quick YouTube video and a slate breakdown for what appears to be March 9th in the NHL. DFSArmy.com is the site that I represent. I am a coach and a contributor there. If you're catching us for the first time, head over to DFSArmy.com, follow the link in the bottom of the description here of the video, and read our content. Take a look at our VIP program. We can discuss a lot more in detail there than we can here. So also follow me on Twitter at Chapodong, and we can talk there as well. So if you use that coupon code CHOP, you get a 20% discount. That is grandfathered in for the life of the membership. Our prices just went up. They might go up again when baseball or certainly when football season hits again. Don't miss out. I can't express enough how many guys are talking on Twitter about the value that this site brings to them with the coaching and the Slack channels, which I'll show you really, really quick. This is our Slack channel for our VIPs. Lots of discussion in real time goes back and forth in there. Anyway, let's bust up this slate. You can see this is kind of an all-value team right now of guys that I'm considering. Cheap punt plays, guys bringing value and whatnot. We may have time to get into that. We may not. I'm going to try and run down this slate as fast as I can for you. We're going to start off with the New York Rangers and the Carolina Hurricanes. New York has started to come on a little bit. They've won their last 2 games. They're 6-3-1 in their last 10. They carry the Vegas favorite. Lundqvist has not been bad. And in this head-to-head matchup between the Carolina Hurricanes, the New York Rangers own an 8-2 head-to-head record. So pretty decent. 5.5 total. Not great, but not bad. Should be a little bit of scoring here. From who? I have no freaking idea because none of these guys are bringing value on a consistent enough basis for cash. They're not scoring enough points yet. The Vegas line, as a matter of fact, has actually gone down a little bit more towards an even game. So Vegas doesn't like this game quite as much. But if you want to jump in a little bit of that game, I'd call them a secondary offense. Carolina, I'm off of them. Philly and Toronto, both secondary offenses. Again, you see a 5.5 over-under. You see a minus 135 here in favor of Toronto. I'm not touching a goalie out of this one. I will tell you that Philadelphia has been shooting the puck like mad lately. And Toronto has given up shots on goal, so there should be an activity advantage there for Philadelphia. There is some nice value on that Philadelphia team. Down here, Mr. McDonald on the front line is cheap as hell and averages 1.5 to 3, 2.5 points per game over the last 4 weeks. That can get you a little bit of cheap value right there. I will also tell you that Gudas is another one that's been bringing a little bit of value lately on his side of the game. Looking into the Toronto side of things, we know Toronto, we say it all the time, high-powered offense gives up a lot of points. That's a boost to the opponent. It's a boost to every game they play is a liable shootout. Out of these guys, though, I don't know which ones are rolling well. I mean, they can explode at any point in time. Mr. Kadri here is the only one I trust in cash. Scroll down, Minnesota and Tampa Bay. Now, I mean, don't get me wrong. If you want to stack this whole line in a GPP, do it. In cash, I'm telling you, Kadri's the only one I trust. Minnesota, this line is a kind of a 50-50. This line has been drifting back down towards even money as well. Vegas doesn't have a real heavy favorite in this one. The only player that I like in this game is Mr. Hansel down here for Minnesota. I will tell you there are other plays in there. Kucherov's an electric player. We know that. Hedman down here has been great lately, but these guys are pretty expensive, and Minnesota's a decent defensive team in terms of giving up fantasy points. And honestly, Tampa Bay isn't giving up a ton of points either, but Minnesota is a fairly powerful team. So it's kind of one of those mediocre matchups. It's not really one that's liable to explode because it's not mediocre bad. It's mediocre defensive, if that makes sense. Jump over to Anaheim and Chicago. Chicago's my primary offense tonight. Goes without saying, these guys are just still on fire. 9-1 in their last 10. They've won 7 in a row. They've got the Vegas favorite of the minus 160. It's actually up to minus 175 now. This thing is trending more towards the Blackhawks. That leads me to Corey Crawford. Corey Crawford's probably my pick goalie. I don't like a 160 or a 175. I want to see it get to minus 200 or even higher. There isn't one tonight, and out of all of the shuffling around to pick from, this is kind of where I'm settling, and here's why. Corey Crawford, 8-1 in his last 9 games. He does allow goals, though. Anaheim should score on him. He's not liable to pitch a shutout, that's for sure. But 7-2-1 is Chicago in their last 10 head-to-head meetings with Anaheim. And Corey Crawford has gotten 5+ DraftKings points in 6 of his last 7 games. That's pretty safe on a slate like tonight. That leads me to just throw Crawford in there and move on. If I wanted value plays on the Chicago side, I'm looking at Brent Seabrook, Panic, Taves, and Kane. And if I'm looking over here on the Anaheim side, because they've got some value too, Eves and Getzlaf. You can't go wrong with a couple of these other guys like Fowler I've talked about quite a bit. Some of these guys are doing, fairly well, but generally your cash safe guys are the ones that I mentioned. Bernier allows goals, and with Gibson going down, Bernier's allowing a lot of goals. This game here could be a good one. Both sides of it could be viable in cash. New Jersey and Colorado, these guys are going to score some goals too. Let me run down the particulars for you. New Jersey's 1-7-2 in their last 8. Colorado's 3-6-1 in their last 10. So not exactly, I'm sorry, New Jersey's last 8, I should have said they've lost 8 in a row. They're 1-7-2 in their last 10. They've lost 8 in a row. You got a crap total on this one. Neither side is favored very heavily. The only player I would take for cash out of New Jersey is Palmieri. I don't know who I would take on Colorado, being that it's a defensive-oriented game. I will say this. Corey Schneider has allowed 15 goals in his last 5 starts. He's been getting demolished. And Picard has allowed 13 in his last 5. Colorado does own the head-to-head matchup here, 8-1-1 in their last 10 meetings with New Jersey. So there is something to be said there. It won't surprise me if they win the game. Is it something I'm going to put a lot of DFS stake in? No. Jumping over to the Montreal Canadiens and the Calgary Flames. Another 5 over-under. It's not great, but I don't really understand why. I mean, both goalies have been all right. Carey Price has won his last 5. He's allowed less than 2 in all of those 5. Brian Elliott, 7-1, and he's won his last 6. Last 6 in a row he's won. You want to take a GPP shot on one of these guys, go for it. And he has also allowed less than 2 goals, Brian Elliott has, in all but 1 of his last 7 games. So there's something to be said for how these goalies are playing. As far as giving up points, they're kind of both bottom third. They're not really tough defensively, but they're not bad. So in shots, they're not really shooting a lot. They're not really giving up a lot of shots. Both these teams are kind of weird. But then when you look at the team records, because of the goalie play, Montreal is 7-3, and they've won 6 in a row. In their last 10 games, they're 7-3, and they've won their last 6. They're heating up. I don't know how much of that really is leading to fantasy production, though, because they're not really scoring, 4, 5, 6 goals. They're kind of scoring twosies and threesies, which is okay for some fantasy production, but you've really got to nail it, and you're not going to stack a line because you can't really tell if that top line is going to get all of those goals. If you look at Calgary, they've won 7 in a row, and they're 8-1-1 in their last 10. So these guys are on the backs of their goalies. I'm waiting for them to break out because they've shown some offensive life this year, but I'm just not quite seeing it yet. If I looked at Montreal, I would take Pacioretty in cash, and if I looked at Calgary, I might take their defenseman Brody as a cheap punt play over on Draftkings because his activity's there, and he's averaging about 3 points a game. So that's not terrible for that price. Scroll down to Ottawa and Arizona. Ottawa would probably be my second favorite offense of the night, but Ottawa is coming off of a back-to-back they played last night. They are 7-3 in their last 10, though, and they've won 4 in a row, which ain't bad. And Arizona, not exactly reeling, but not exactly playing well, and we know they're one of the teams we like to target. If I look at Mike Smith, he's lost 4 in a row. He's given up 16 goals in his last 4 games. So that's, suggesting that Ottawa is going to score some points. Arizona does give up the most fantasy points over the last 4 weeks of any team in the game. They give up the second most shots. So those numbers are still holding true, but they do play better at home. So there's that, and being on the back end of back-to-back. That's really the only thing that doesn't have me ranking Ottawa kind of as high as I like Chicago tonight. The thing about Ottawa is they're pretty cheap. You can pick off a couple of guys in here. If you wanted to look at Carlson, he's not cheap, but boy, that dude's a stud. He's averaging about 6 fantasy points in his last 10 games on DraftKings. Phaneuf is a fine play. You get up here, and you want to jump into some of the power play too, like Zingle, maybe. You want to jump into a Pogo. Pogo's been fine. That's another value play, cheap value play. Burroughs, borderline. Stone, borderline. If you look at Stone, Stone's up and down. If I kick over here, I can show you why. I had him queued up and ready to go for you. You look at the activity, 21 shots on goal, 5 block shots, not too terrible. You look at the 3.3 points per, his last 10 games in a 5,800 salary, and you go, okay, it's about half, a little more than half. That's about what we look for in cash. Let's see how steady he is for cash. Oh, look, 3.5, 3.5, 2.5. Okay, so not great, but not bad. and then you go 0, 1.5, 1.5, 0, 3.5, and then a 14. There's your outlier. That's why he's got his 3.3. Otherwise, he'd be a 3 or below, and 3 or below is not good for cash. So I don't like Stone for cash. I don't mind him, for a GPP because they're in a good spot, but I don't like him for cash. So that's a brief rundown. If I was on Arizona, I'd only be taking Goligoski. He's about it for me. He's pretty consistent, and again, he's a cheap DraftKings punt type play. New York Islanders and the Vancouver Canucks. I'm not on Vancouver at all. The Islanders are carrying the minus 150 favorite here. There's nothing to say about the goalies, nothing to say about their records, nothing to say about their head-to-head matchups that's going to tip you off to anything. New York has been powerful in the past. They've slumped off a little bit lately. They've given up some defense in the past, given up some points in the past, but that doesn't make me like Vancouver. The only one I'm really looking at here, your standards, your Lee, Bailey, Tavares are not bad. Strome, Ladd, not bad, but Chimera is the one I'm looking at the most. If you look at him, the defenseman, Hamonic's not bad if he gets to play. DeHaan's not bad if he gets to play. Leddy's always fine, but he's been slumping a little bit lately, so I'm not real high on him. If I scroll down to Nashville and LA, this one's really pissing me off because these are both secondary offenses again. They slapped a 5 on this game. Jonathan Quick has been pretty good in his 4 games back from injury. He's 2-0-1 in those 4 starts. But damn, and Pekka Rinne's been giving up some freaking goals, man. And he's given up 26 goals in his last 8 games. So I'm not on him as a goalie, that's for sure. But why this game isn't going to go over, I don't really understand. If I was looking at anybody in cash on the LA side, they're not really going all that well, except for Tanner Pearson. Tanner's fine. But if you look over here on the Nashville side, we know that LA is a typically defensive team. They're a little middle of the road right now as far as giving up fantasy points, so they can be had. They are playing at home, and Vegas is supporting them from this 135 up to a minus 150. So Vegas likes LA in this one, and they may be just liking Quick. I don't know. Quick scares me if he's on his game, but damn, the value on this Nashville side is killing me. If I look at the Nashville side, Forsberg, Ellis, Jossie, Colin Wilson even, Jarnkrok, these guys are all playing fine, and they're still hitting value, even though their prices are coming up a little bit. If you ran Forsberg and Jossie, or, Forsberg and Arvidsson or something, I'm not going to fault you for that, man. But going against LA, it makes me worry a little bit, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to avoid this spot tonight, to be quite honest with you. Washington and San Jose, fade. Why do I say that? There are other games, Chicago, Ottawa, maybe Nashville, maybe Montreal, Anaheim. These guys should score some points tonight. You can pick off a Palmieri in New Jersey. You can pick off a Kadri in Toronto. You can pick off a couple cheap guys out of Philly, and you can fill your roster out. You don't need to pay these prices. Holtby got yanked in his last start. Am I off of him? No. But San Jose, can do some damage. Problem is you're going to pay. These guys are all pretty expensive, and Hurdle's dropped off a little bit in his production here recently too. So God, I don't like the game forcing me to spend up in a game where I'd rather spend up in Chicago. I'd rather spend up in better spots in cash. I don't like the 5 over under. I don't like the fact that these two defensive teams they're offensive teams, but they're also defensive teams. They might suppress each other a little bit, and you might end up with kind of a clunker. And if I do, I don't want to be paying $6,000 and $7,000 for my skaters to get a clunker. I can't do that in cash. If you want, this is a great GPP game. If you want to play in some tournaments tonight, these guys can do it for you. Absolutely 100%. Stack them up. They can do it. But you're banking on the fact that they will. In cash, I have to almost bank on the fact that they might not. So that leads me in other directions. That roughly busts up this slate for you. If we look quickly at these guys, these are some of the guys I mentioned. Taves and Kane, Seabrook, those guys are all good. Colin Wilson's not terrible. Chimera's not terrible. Richard Panik's another Chicago guy. Goligoski. Andrew McDonald's super cheap in Philly tonight. Stone, we said no. And Corey Crawford is my goalie. If you want to look really quickly down his game log, you'll see the point totals that he puts up. That's if my computer will let me. Anyway, guys, I drift off into breaking this slate down a little bit more if we possibly can. Check out dfsarmy.com. Check us out in our VIP Slack chat rooms. Join us on Twitter at Chapadong. You guys will take care. We'll see you guys maybe tomorrow or sometime this weekend.